All right, so I have a full resolution sketch here that's 350 pixels per inch, and the area of my actual sketch is around printable size, 13 by 19 inches, which makes my overall image size just enormous. 40 inches by 30 inches by 350 pixels per inch. So that's 14,000 pixels by 10,500 pixels. So that's very large. That's big enough for like a big subway sign. It's very important to check your resolution at this stage, because if you're accidentally at a resolution of only 72, if you never upped your resolution from your sketch, or if your inches aren't big enough, basically if you're not close to this, around 14,000 pixels, then your resolution is too small for a good print. And then you're just going to be wasting everything you do from now on. Because we're doing a raster project, it's all based on pixels. So this will also test if your resolution is high enough on the references you found. So when you bring a reference in, you can just drag and drop it from the desktop or from a folder like I'm doing now. It will come in as what's called a smart object. And in Photoshop that means, or a smart layer, that means that it's referencing an external file. So it will come in with this X through it, which is an automatic transform box, which lets you scale it. So these are bigger than I need, which is much better than smaller than what I need. And I can place them by hitting return. But the problem is, if I try to erase them or edit them, it won't let me, because it is a smart object. And smart objects must be rasterized before proceeding. I'm going to say, okay. Do I want to rasterize a smart object? I don't yet, right? Rasterizing is something we saw when we were using the vector shapes, right? In order to erase from them, I have to rasterize them, but then they don't scale up. So instead of rasterizing all of these, we are going to make selections from them. So for instance, if I just want to use this little base of rock, I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to use my lasso tool, just like we did in the cartoon jumble exercise. And I don't need to get a perfect lassoing of it, because I want a lot of this texture around. But I'm going to loosely select around it. And the most important thing is to get rid of the hard edges of the photo. So I lassoed around what I wanted, and then I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate that selection onto a new layer. So that's how you turn these rectangular references into puzzle pieces. Now, because I duplicated just a little bit of it, that automatically rasterizes my duplicate. And that's ready to be placed in wherever I need it. Okay? So I'm going to do that for my other references as well. Like this waterfall. I actually want to use a lot of this, but I don't need it quite so big, so I hit Command T, and I'm transforming the smart object. But now I don't want all those hard edges necessarily, especially in these transitions with all the greenery. So I'm going to select around it, and I'll leave myself lots of room to transition. And then make a duplicate. Command J. Then I'll turn off the layer underneath. So that's a big puzzle piece. In fact, it looks like, according to my sketch, I don't need all of this stuff, but I might as well leave it in for right now. So what are we doing? We're bringing in reference. I have a few more to bring in here. It comes in as a smart object. We can hold down Shift and place it by hitting return. But then you want to use your lasso tool and isolate just the selected area that you want to use with a little bit of extra space around it. And then you duplicate it, Command J, and turn off the smart layer underneath. And that gives you something you can work with. Because I'm going to put that with this. I'm going to make a little two-stage waterfall here. So this waterfall rock can become my foreground element. Something like that. I have this temple in the background, way bigger than I need. Hold down Shift. If you hold down Shift and Option, it will shrink towards the center like so. Make it just a little bit bigger than I need for right now. And then these hard edges I don't really need, so I'm going to soften these up. But that top edge might be useful. Command J, turn off the layer behind it. All right, and then you're also likely going to need some transitional reference. Notice I already have more than 5. So this is a little transitional element to help integrate this temple in with kind of this heavy jungle scene. And basically I just want this for the greenery and the emptiness of the sky. But I definitely don't want this watermark. So when I select it, I'm going to select around that, and I'm thinking of how it will overlap with others. So I can leave the top edge, but when it comes to these other parts, I can make it a lot softer. And then turn off the smart layer underneath. So making the puzzle pieces. And that's why I gave myself so much space around, so I can see all of my pieces. Now this piece is right here. It's this tree and all this stuff. I definitely don't want a big rectangle in the middle. So this selection is going to be pretty important. So I'm going to select around, loosely around all these elements, like clumps of grass and rock that I can use to transition into other elements. But I'm not going to try to isolate each leaf or anything right now. That'll be in the next stage of the process. Duplicate it, turn that off. Now I've got my puzzle piece. I can shrink that down a little. And remember, in order to have an effective sketch, an idea, you don't need to be an amazing artist. You didn't need to draw this all that well in order to be able to be informed by it, right? These next phases, how we manipulate our references, is the real test of how we'll succeed. And here's another transitional element, a lot of foreground moss that can help soften these edges in the foreground. I just want to lasso around them. I doubt I want this tree trunk, but I can keep it in for the time being. And the goal is to make a fantasy landscape that's immersive, that we really like, that we can put a creature or creatures in later to activate and just be inspired by. I'll put that down here for safekeeping. I have the auto select layer turned on so I can just effortlessly move between these different puzzle pieces. This one I actually really only want the ground, that cave opening. But this greenery will be helpful to transition, and these rocks. But I don't want those hard edges. And then lastly, what I'm calling the Drooping Tree. Now this I pretty much want to use all of. And this fits right into the corner here. So we start building our scene now from the background forward. So I'm going to take my furthest background and try to fill in that skyline. And I'll start with this. And that's why I like having my sketch in a sketchbook, not just in the computer. Because that allows me to refer to it once I start covering up my sketch here. Now I want not all of this picture, but just the corner of it like so. The benefit of having a smart layer like this one is I can keep resizing it and it will always scale perfectly to the resolution. For these other elements that I've already rasterized, I don't want to shrink them smaller than I want, hit return, and then make them bigger because that will actually hurt their resolution overall. So that big tree is about right there. And if it's helpful, I can take the opacity down and kind of place it with my sketch. So that's about where I had it planned to go. I'll take it back to 100%. Now if I want to rasterize this, all I have to do is double click, scratch that. All I have to do is right click and then say rasterize layer, and then it won't be a smart layer anymore. Okay, the next element is the greenery, this big chunk. I'm going to push this layer on top of that layer. Should work from the bottom up. So I can use the shortcut Command right bracket, move it up above. I can take its opacity down to kind of see where it's overlapping. And I can use Command T to scale it. And you're allowed to warp as you need to. But if there's any man-made structures in the warping, or if you warp too much, it's going to start looking pretty weird. So I'm going to push that up a little bit. Okay, good. So now we have kind of this continuation of this skyline. And I know that this temple, that doesn't make sense quite yet. I'm going to try to fix that with this tree and with some other things. Now this temple goes in. Shrink that. About there for now. And now, let's see, this tree element. Need to put it above everything else. It's going to start tying these things together, hopefully. I'm going to leave it that size for right now. And then actually to transition here, I have this element. Which I'm going to push behind the tree. And these are supposed to kind of fill in the rocks in the foreground. Then I have this extra material if I need it. So move that above. So we should have too much stuff right now, and then we're going to start removing it. And now we get to my waterfalls. My my little